Universe is a whole. This whole is made of several parts that are different from each other, which we call worlds, systems, and realms. In the universe, each realm has a particular characteristic. And these characteristics are arranged according to the evolutionary needs of spirits. So, what we call primary matter or matter substance is an amorphous matter state, qualified by absolute motionless and formlessness, which constitutes the main matter or ferment of this whole universal. This substance, from the moment it first started to move, by becoming more and more complex, created stages accompanied by higher characteristic changes in comparison to each other. We call each of these matter stages nuclei or primary matter of the realms that fill up the matter universe, and which display different attributes compared to each other. This is because the primary matter of these realms, which become milieux for manifestations which are more developed from each other, only have the ability to create the motions and forms particular to their own realms. So, the initial matter or atom of each realm is one of the ranges arrived at by the universe's original substance, in the journey ascending from its initial state to the universal whole. And each of these ranges carries the characteristic of that realm in its constitution. The primary matter of any realm is the initial matter of that realm. In this initial matter, there is the essence of all states and forms particular to that realm. The component that creates these states and forms is motion. And the quality and character of the motions are different in a manner to give birth to each realm's own properties. That is, there are separate forms of motions particular to each realm. Therefore, because the atom or nucleus which is the initial primary matter of a realm has not yet revealed the motions of that realm, it is in a motionless and amorphous state. These initial atoms, by displaying and varying, increasing and accelerating initial motions, gradually make up all states and forms particular to that realm. As matter descends from above to below, the appearance of their progress from motion to motionless, from activity to inertia, as an immutable rule constitutes the scientific observation of this truth. The highest and most developed matter are those that have the most complex motions. In contrast, as matter descends below, in the development hierarchy their motions lessen, they regress to simpler states, and eventually they assume a state which is near to zero in regard to possibilities of motion in that realm. The reduction in the motion of matter as it descends offers another valuable observation. Since this reduction in the motions of matter and their simplification necessitates matter becoming more primitive, the reduction and simplification of influences external to that matter result in the corresponding reduction and simplification of that matter's motions. For example, those who observe the structure of hydrogen and uranium atoms will see the truth of this. The hydrogen atom is a matter state qualified by the motions of innumerable qualities and quantities. The uranium atom, which is a more complex form of this atom, carries within it many times more complex motions. Moreover, the influence of a hydrogen atom on its surroundings is less than uranium's. So, the abundance of influences uranium has on its surroundings, compared to those of hydrogen, shows that it is receiving more influences than hydrogen does. Since the influences only manifest through the motions they cause in matter, the motions of uranium atoms are much greater and more complex than those of hydrogen atoms. Nevertheless, here, uranium sending out more influences to its surroundings reflects the fact that it receives more influences. That is, it is displaying the reactions of the incoming influences accordingly. For, no influence is unilateral, and in matter neither does a reaction occur without an action, nor is there an action that remains without a response. All state transitions and all the ways in which forms take place and change are only possible through the motions and diversification of motions. Therefore, The primary matter of our realm which has not yet exhibited any motion should hardly have any state and form particular to our world at all. That is why we call it amorphous, that is, the formless matter of our realm. Thus, primary matter is a reality which can only be conceived and accepted theoretically in the face of our comprehension of the world, and expresses an apparent absence, and this reality, in order to take particular forms appropriate to our world, needs to gain many values that belong to the earthly sphere and go through many developmental stages. After imparting this knowledge, we proceed to the second important property of primary matter. Mankind may think this: how come that primary matter, despite the fact that it is comparatively inert and motionless, that is, devoid of the motions of our realm, starts to go through some developmental stages by assuming forms that have innumerable motions? In reply to this question, we will also consider the second property of primary matter we mentioned above. Here, we start with an example which everyone can see. On the table there is a pencil which is stationary and motionless. Although this pencil carries innumerable motion complexities within its structure, compared to the rough matter in the room and in regard to our degrees of sight, it is devoid of any motion, that is, it does not stir. Now, if we push this pencil slightly with our finger, it changes position and slides away slightly, that is, it moves. This observation exhibits how matter starts to move with an external influence. If your finger, which occupies the seat of influence, did not push it, it could not move by itself. This is the first property of primary matter we mentioned earlier. However, we also observe that when we push the pencil with our finger it immediately responds to this, that is, immediately reacts to an action. If it did not form any resistance against our finger, it would be impossible for it to move. In that case our finger would go through it, like an object moving through smoke. Thus, although motionless in itself, the possibility of responding immediately to any external motion also exists within the pencil. And this constitutes its second property. So, primary matter in its inert state, which cannot afford to start to move by itself, or more correctly, has no motion in itself, has the possibility of responding to any influence coming from outside and of moving in the direction of that influence. And since every motion is an influence against other matter that can constitute a resistant surface to it, that is, that can be sympathized with it, so we express this knowledge with this formula: primary matter, which is motionless, formless and without influence in itself and has no power to move by itself, has the ability to start to move according to the form, direction, degree and intensity of any incoming influence to it from outside and to influence its own surroundings. That is, there is no power in matter to generate energy by itself, but it has the possibility to start to move as the result of the external influence, and to display energy manifestations. The reaction, that is, the equivalent motion which has been evoked in primary matter by an external influence, does not continue after that influence ceases. Here, let us return to the above example. Let us slightly touch the pencil, which is standing still, with our finger and start to push it with a slight pressure. When the pressure from our finger stops, we see that the pencil also stops immediately and returns to its previous motionless state. So, this pencil keeps its state only as long as the continuance of our finger's influence, and the moment this influence ceases, it loses the possibility of movement. If we give the pencil a powerful flick with our finger, it will move only as long as the influence of this flick continues, and when the intensity of the influence disappears, it stops again. While we have given this example, we do not see the necessity of mentioning the technical variations that may come to mind in regard to the secondary resistance, motions the surroundings may exert upon the pencil. By adding this reality to the two main properties of primary matter we mentioned above, we may say that primary matter, which is inert and motionless in itself, can only start to move as a result of the external influences it receives, and that it keeps its motion as long as these influences continue, and when they cease it will again return to its motionless, inert state. Therefore, what we see as matter in our world is not the primary matter itself, but the various forms and states it has taken since the moment it first started to move as a result of influences. However, these forms and states are but the various manifestations of external influences that utilize the possibilities of motion, which exist in primary matter. That is, every influence wakes up one of the possibilities of motion within matter which is latent and unable to wake up by itself. So, we call this transitioning of matter under influences, by starting varied motions to take varied states, the realization of the possibilities hidden in them. We have arrived at a very important stage of the topic. Seeing that the original substance of the universe is devoid of motion by itself and in a formless and inert state, and seeing that it is not capable of motion by itself unless it receives influences from outside, then where do these influences that constitute such a vast universe, with its myriad realities, by creating such infinite states and forms in that amorphous and inert substance, come from? And if matter cannot start to move by itself, what is the reason for its becoming engaged in infinite states and forms? According to the knowledge of essence matter and of the disposition of matter, it is not appropriate for rational principles to accept that matter in the universe could breed these influences. There is the imperative to look for these in the truths that exist outside of the universe. And this is actually the situation. We will suffice with pointing out these truths as much as they could be intuited by mankind. Even if our intuitions about the outside of the universe are weak and insufficient, our knowledge regarding the qualities and compositions of the matter substance that constitutes our universe never stops compelling us to accept the imperativeness of the existence of suprasubstance truths that cause myriad manifestations of this substance. Thus, what mankind calls spirit is also among these suprasubstance truths. Therefore, spirit carries a quality that expresses the exact opposite of the main quality of universe substance, which is inert and motionless.